Welcome back to another How I Lead episode. My name is Kurt Frankum, and today we're welcoming in Garth Pedersen from the Queen Creek area in Phoenix area in Arizona. And he reached out to me a few months ago and said, "Hey, I've been trying some different things." And I said, "I want to hear about your different things." And so pay attention to especially he talks about the ministering night they do every fourth Sunday, I believe it was, and how he models or encourages others to go out and minister on this night, making it a group effort and really showing leadership, sort of walk alongside type of leadership with the elders in his quorum. And we talk all things ministering in this. I know there's a variety of ways to come at ministering, to do the interview thing, and Garth simply shares his approach and has some really thoughtful scriptural perspectives when it comes to ministering, and not just making it an assignment, but making it a lifestyle. How do you stimulate that culture? So I think you'll find this interview inspiring. So here's my interview with Garth Pedersen. All right, Garth Pedersen, welcome to the Leading Saints podcast.
Thanks, Kirk. It's good to be here with you.
For sure. Now, you are in the Phoenix area. Is there any specific area in Phoenix where you're at?
We're in the Santan Valley, Queen Creek area.
Oh, Queen Creek. Nice. Very good. Didn't they just announce a temple there, right?
Yep, they just announced a temple.
Very cool. Awesome. How long is your current commute? I assume is it Gilbert?
Yeah, it's about 35, 40 minutes,
nice,
depending on traffic.
So this will get you less than 10. I mean, what more do you need?
Yeah, there's a few possibilities at places that the church owns, but
yeah.
Awesome. We're not going to know for a while. So
yeah, we know that game. So you are currently serving as the Elders Quorum president, is that right?
Yes.
Nice. And you sent me an email a few months back, basically saying, it says, I'm currently an Elders Quorum president, would love to discuss with you how we have moved ministering forward in our ward and the miracles we have seen in the lives of members by using the principles of ministering. If you're interested in talking about it, please let me know. And anytime I get these type of interviews where a quorum or a group somewhere has tried something new and it's working, or tried a slightly different approach, let's get it out there and see if we can duplicate it or help others. So maybe just start. I mean, is it pretty typical? I mean, in Phoenix or Queen Creek, it's pretty traditional ward and makeup, or how would you describe the makeup of your ward and quorum?
Yeah, it's pretty traditional. We have a lot of younger couples moving in and older couples. It kind of fluctuates a little bit because we do have some rental properties and whatnot. But for the most part, it's pretty typical of a normal ward, I guess you would say.
How many elders typically show up to Elders Quorum?
To Elders Quorum, we probably have 20 to 25.
Yeah. Okay.
That come to Elders Quorum, so second hour.
Yeah. Awesome. And then how long have you been in this role?
Almost 3 years. So February will be 3 years. So just over 2.5 years.
Nice. And just approaching this, ministering as a presidency, was this something from the very beginning you tried to do something different, or or was it a few years in, or how'd that work?
So yeah, I've been in leadership way too much. What I've seen in that leadership is there seems to be a lot of times a cultural disconnect when it comes to ministering, right? And I've heard everything. I mean, I've had an Elders Quorum president after he got released in our presidency. He's like, I hate home teaching, right? And so, right, because it just became a burden instead of a blessing to him in his life. And that's exactly what God doesn't want. So, and you've heard everything my ministers don't come, so I'm not going to go, or I've never had ministering happen at my house, so I'm not going to go, or whatnot. And so we felt like, to begin with, that had to be a focus on what we were trying to do as a presidency from the beginning. And so what we tried to do was build a culture of different things that we had seen that didn't work. So, for instance, one of the principles that we tried to implement was a culture of no shame. Because what ends up happening is a lot of times, you'll get up there in Elders Quorum and be like, guys, we got to do our ministry. And I know you're right. And so it's like this constant nagging. And if any of you are married, then you hate that from your wife. So
Right.
I'm not going to do it to you. And so, right. So there's this expectation almost that I have to say something about ministering all the time. And I rarely say anything about ministering directly or have like a lesson on ministering or whatever. So um, what I've tried to do is um, learn the principles myself first and foremost, right? Because I can't change their hearts. I can only change me. I can only change my attitude towards it or how I live the gospel, right? I learned that from my kids that I can't change them. I can't change my wife. I can't change the brother. And so I got what I, as an elders quorum president and presidency, we have to build a culture as well as an environment where ministering can thrive. And now I'm not going to sit here and be like, we're amazing at ministering or like, we always get 100% ministering or something like that. That's not what the Lord expects us right away, right? To just be like, everybody get on board and this is a miracle. And, but it's that line upon line, precept upon precept, just individually. I love how they've changed it from, go and do these things to you're just going to have an interview every quarter and to talk about it and to have that space where you can discuss the principles of ministering in a setting and also demonstrate to them what ministering looks like. So anyways, that's what we tried to do from the beginning. And so we discussed, how do you create that environment? What are the principles that involve ministering? And then how do we go out and help invite them to live those principles?
Yeah. So I'm trying to make sure I'm getting all the details here. So the first one was no shame. Like that was in the component of like things that didn't work. Was there anything else in that as far as things you're going to avoid that didn't work?
A lot of times what ends up happening is we'll give an assignment and then see you in 3 months. Right. And we expect them and we almost set them up to some degree to fail. Just like a child, you can't just be like, hey, 6-year-old, go clean your room and then expect them to know how to do it. And I'm not saying that we treat them like children or anything like that, but it's kind of that same mentality because there's the natural man within each of us that has reservations, especially in our time of interacting with people we don't know, even within the church. And so that was another thing that we heavily tried to figure out how we could better implement that. And some of the things that we found was actually in our conversation with the bishop and me and the Relief Society president, she suggested that we start inviting the brethren or the ministering sisters on visits with us. So instead of me going with my counselor to go visit a family, I would invite the ministering brothers to go with me. Mm-hmm. So I would set up the appointment. I would get, I'd already be meeting with them for whatever reason. And, you obviously got to take it case by case because you might have financial, issues or privacy concerns. So you don't want to take them on every single, visit. But if I was going to visit somebody, then I would take the ministering brother with me. If I could, if we could get the schedule to work out. And, just those little tiny tweaks, those little tiny nuggets of spiritual wisdom, if you want to say, or, spiritual impressions where the Lord said, just try this. Yeah. And then that leads to the next step and the next step and the next step. And I think too often we try to make this grandiose, we got to change everything. That wasn't what we set out to do. We just got to make this huge, complicated program, or whatever. It's just like, no, what's the one thing, what can we do right now, today, or this week, or this month, or whatever it is. And let's build towards that vision that God has of a Zion people. Like we're not close to there. Yeah. That's our goal. But if we don't have that vision, right, the scriptures say, without vision, the people perish. If the leadership doesn't have that vision of where we're trying to get and what ministering can do, and as long as ministering is just a program, if that's what we believe it is, then we'll never understand what God's trying to teach us through ministry.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So the two big concepts I hear is one, that the no shame,
Yeah.
which is powerful. Like, and really, what does that look like? I mean, like you said, it like you just don't always bring it up, right? Sometimes it can
Yeah.
be overdone, and sometimes if you're the elders quorum president, or at least study president, that's always bringing up ministering, it's sort of like this. It's more about your ego as the leader because you got to
Yeah.
get this done. And if I don't remind you that it's got to get done, they won't get done. And you kind of hyper focus on it that way. But, and then the other one, I don't know if you'd frame it this way, but just that continued support of being there, not just saying, here's your assignment. You know, we're going to talk about it here in a few months, but here's your assignment. How can we all work together to make sure people are being looked after?
Exactly. Um, what I felt like, because I was in the bishopric when President Nelson came into his as the prophet, and I saw at the time, they're making all these changes and making difference. It was more support. Like, we're there to support you. You as the parents and as the individuals and families are to lead your family in righteousness, and we're there to support you. We're there to give you the tools that you need. Um, but it's your responsibility as the parent. And when it's funny, the night before I was called into the stake presidency, right, I had a prayer of, Father, I need you to help me become a better father, right? Because I was struggling with stuff with my kids, one in particular, but right, with my kids, and I was just like, I need your help. I need to know how to do this better. And the next day, that's when he called me. And right, it has changed me. It has made me a better father, and it's because of the ministering aspect of the calling in nature. Right, my calling isn't to have a ministering assignment; it's to minister to everybody in the ward, and help others to do the same. But going from that supporting, or from that kind of mentality of, oh well, the church is going to teach that, or the Relief Society is going to teach that, or the young men are going to teach that to my kids, to no, that's my responsibility. No, I need to be the one that's taking on that role. I think was a huge step for the church in not necessarily saying this wasn't the case before, but again, making that cultural change and shift to saying this is what's important. And this is how we should be focusing on the gospel, is teaching it to our kids. Everybody loved taking 1 hour out of a church. I'm sure there were some people that didn't, but everybody loved the taking the 1 hour and like, oh yeah, this is awesome. And then it's like, but what was the purpose? Right.
Yeah.
The purpose was to spend more time with the family. And then we see the blessings of that and the preparation of that through the lockdowns of COVID and whatnot. So,
Mm-hmm. So we've talked sort of about these things that you're trying to avoid, like the no shaming and making sure you're offering support and things. But I mean, maybe let's back up and just tell us, like, what are you doing? What have you found that's working? Is if you were to articulate just your approach in general to ministering as the Elders Quorum presidency, how would you unpack that?
yeah. So, like I said, it hasn't been like, this is all the information, right? This is the path forward. Um, but it's been a steady flow of revelation through the keys of the priesthood. And a lot of the stuff doesn't come from me, right? It's in a council, either with the Relief Society, with me and the Relief Society president and the bishop, or me and my counselors, right? It doesn't matter where it comes from. It's recognizing, hey, let's try that. Or yes, that's the right answer. But what we tried to implement at the beginning was, one thing that I hate is like formal interviews, right? And so I was like, I hate formal interviews. I'm pretty sure everybody else does, so I'm just going to assume that. Right, this sit down and PPI type. Okay, let's all get dressed up and talk about whatever. Um, and so what I decided to do, I tried that at the beginning. I was like, this just isn't me. This just isn't working, right? I'm not. That's just not me. So what I decided to do, that I would go to their homes, And two things with that. One, I could get a feel for what's going on in their home better if I was at their home, right? Because they're more comfortable, they're more relaxed, they're more used to being in their home, but also that I could show them how to minister, that I could be an example of ministering. So what I would do in those interviews, right? And they weren't really like, I don't really call them interviews, but whatever, would be to sit down with them and just see how they were doing, right? And it didn't have to be anything long. I scheduled 10 to 15 minutes apart, and that's with driving, and just kind of interact with them and then just say, hey, how are your families doing? And, well, I'm not doing it, right? That was a lot of the answer at the beginning. Well, I haven't really talked to them or haven't done anything. And so instead of saying, okay, well, you need to do this, you need to do that, and you need to do that, I would just invite them to do one thing. So 3 of the principles that we try to teach, first is pray for them. That's the first step. So if I can't visit with them or I can't have any contact with them or whatever, like for whatever reason, or I right now don't feel comfortable like interacting, right? Start praying for them. And let that be the first step in your ministering journey, if you will, right, in the process. And then right, then I can move from there. The next time, okay, are you praying for them? Great. What is the next step that you could take in that ministry? Well, let's get to know them. Let's communicate with them and get to know them. And so that's the second principle that we try to teach, is communicating with them, whatever that is, text, at church, different things like that. And then get to know them, right? Learn their story. People like telling about themselves most of the time, and get to know them, because I can't get inspiration on how I can help them if I don't know anything about them, right? I can't just start from a blank slate. I got to get to know them first and understand their situation so that I can say, okay, Lord, I think they need this, or they've said they need this, so how can I help them with that? And then thirdly is to love and serve them. Now, you can do all 3 of those at the same time. I'm not saying it's a progression, but those are the 3 principles that we try to teach. And ultimately, that third one is the one that we want to hone in on, that I actually feel a genuine love for them, that I actually feel that I care for them. That's what the Lord is trying to teach us through ministering. It's can you love anybody? And in the world that we live in today, you can see the erosion of that, right? People don't communicate with each other. If they are communicating, it's online. They're yelling back and forth at each other. And we're communicating past each other instead of with each other, or having a genuine care for each other. So if we want to get back to having a society to where we're connected and we feel comfortable talking to our neighbors about anything, then I have to build that relationship. And you're probably aware of this, Kurt, but guys aren't the best at relationships, right? That's not the highest priority on our list, right?
Yeah.
Whereas sisters, relationship is a higher priority for them.
Yeah.
So they're usually just naturally better at it. So getting them to get past that, that's one thing that we implemented was that. So
Yeah, awesome. I love these 3 things, and just sort of give structure to it all. Obviously, the praying for others, that's like, absolutely, I can do that. That's 100% in my control. And then communication and getting to know them, that's, a little bit easier. Okay, I can reach out and send a text. I can maybe stop by and get to know them there. The last one with love and serve, that's where I think it gets tough, where it's like, well, I mean, I went over there, I asked them, like, is there anything that we can do for you? And they said no, or I don't want to like push myself into their life if they don't really want me to help them into something. So is anything else come to mind as far as how can we go about serving others when maybe they're not necessarily wanting that, or there's not something obvious to do for them?
I think we have to, and I've taught this in a lesson before, and it was probably one of the more powerful lessons that I've ever taught. And mostly that's because I saw the change in people and referencing it. is that we have to understand what agency is, right? And I tell the brethren, look, we're not there to force ourselves into their lives. We're there to love and support them the best we can, and how they will allow us to do it. Um, so, right, I can't come in to the relationship expecting X to happen, right? I have to come into the relationship of what I'm going to bring to the relationship, not what I'm going to get out of the relationship or what I expect them to do as a result of my actions or my agency. So, right, for instance, one thing that I've tried to do is read the scriptures in a different light as a parent. Over the last few years, I've tried to become a lot better father and focused on that with my kids, is to recognize that the scriptures aren't so much about a historical Nephi or Lehi, but it's about how God interacts with his children. And so, therefore, there should be principles and doctrine and evidence of how God interacts with his children. And so I started reading the scriptures differently. And I'll give you an example. We take the account of Nephi going back and getting the plates, right? Mm-hmm. And we've all read it a million times, right? But I saw it in a different light when I started looking at it this way. And that's that the first time they just kind of cast lots. It's kind of like chance. I mean, they believe that God divinely would inspire that kind of a thing, right? That was just in their culture. So that's where they started. They just started there. And that we see how that didn't work out, right? And then the second was, okay, well, maybe we can buy him from him, right? Or we can bribe him or whatever. So they tried that, right? Again, a part of their culture and our culture, right? We would think might be able to do that. But anyways, and then the third time it was, let the Lord guide you where to go. But in that, I recognize we're forgetting a character in this story that we never talk about, and that's Laban. So perhaps the reason that it took those 3 tries, that the Lord didn't guide them the whole time, was to give Laban mercy, to give Laban agency. Because the Lord knew that at the end of the 3rd try, what was going to happen to Laban? He was going to lose his life. But the Lord in his mercy gave him 2 opportunities to choose to give up the plates. And so I began to start looking at the scriptures differently. And I think we have to look at ministering differently, as opposed to I failed to I gave them an opportunity to exercise their agency. I gave them an opportunity to let a servant of the Lord into their home or to just talk to them, right? And I've seen that over time, as the Lord says, right, that our job is to keep ministering to them, keep loving them, keep inviting them, because you never know when their heart will change and they'll come and turn back to me and they will be healed. So our obligation, or our duty as a minister, or any calling really, or just as a parent, right? You can apply all this to being a parent, is to give them opportunities to use their agency to do righteous things and let the Lord then heal them and change them.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I love that perspective of that story, in First Nephi, because maybe for decades, right, the Lord was working on Laban's heart to be like, hey, why don't you be humble and listen to my voice, and because there'll come a time when I need you to hand over this record to this random guy named Nephi, but he didn't get there, right, because of his own choices or whatever, and so it came down to it of like, I've been working with Laban, but at the end of the day, he gets to pick the life that he leads, and he's sort of in this place of he's lost heart, he's wicked, and he wants to kill people, right? And so the Lord will figure out a way that way, but to recognize there's agency in this, right? Like Laban was his own entity that was functioning on his own choices, and that's sort of how the story ended up, right? Anything else with give them opportunities to exercise their agency? I mean, you just talked about that, but anything else there that we need to hit on?
Just that idea of recognize that they do have agency, that we can't force them into this. Doctrine and Covenants 121, right, teaches us the principles of using the priesthood or any power or authority. And it's interesting to me that the first principle isn't love that's listed. You would think that that would be the first principle listed, right? Or anything else. It's actually persuasion. And so a lot of times we think, oh, well, I told them, right? Or I said something, or I gave a lecture, or I'm sure, Kurt, you've probably seen this with your kids, right? I've told you a million times to not do that or whatever. It's like they're
Yeah.
just not getting it, right? And so I've found the best way to persuade people is for me to learn it better, for me to make sure that I have the Spirit with me, and to live it better, and then show other people that this is possible. Because if I can do it, like I'm just a normal dude that has no idea what he's doing. I'm just trying to live this life the best I can, and follow the Lord just like anybody else. But persuading them that they can do it. I think a lot of times it's Laman and Lemuel. I mean, they see an angel, right? Going back to the same story, they see an angel, and yet what do? The first thing they complain and say, "Oh, well, God, what can God do?" They had no faith. They didn't believe. They never believed. That was their problem. Their problem wasn't knowledge. Their problem wasn't a testimony or a witness. It wasn't an experience. It was that they didn't have faith in any of that stuff. At least that was lasting enough to change them.
Yeah. Then another dynamic that comes to mind with this concept of agency and recognizing that those we minister have agency, and they can let us into their life or not. And if they don't, it's not that they're like Laban and a bad person and whatever. But I think another thing is not only agency, but like people just have different life dynamics, right? That maybe they're in a really busy phase of life, and people coming over to their house or ministering, or them looking for ways to serve. It's like, that's just one more thing I got to figure out. And I think the trap comes is from the leadership standpoint, when we as elders quorum presidents or relief society presidents, when we sort of attach our ego to that ministering interviews number. Like, I am going to be 100% ministering interviews person, and if this doesn't happen, then there's something wrong with my leadership. When in reality, you probably know this better than others, that some people are hard to sort of nail down and sit down with, or have that informal or formal ministering interview. And then you get to the end of the quarter and you're like, I fell short. When in reality, it's like, that's okay. Like, I don't know. I sometimes we hyper invest in that one sliver of our role because there's a number attached, and it's like in the system, and like everybody's going to see it. At least that those that the powers that be will see it, right? So that comes to mind with agency. That may mean that you're not going to be that 100% leader on paper.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to this no shame. I can't shame myself either.
Yeah, exactly.
Like shame is Satan's greatest tool, right? I can't shame myself into, I didn't get 100%. Like, it should motivate me, yes, right, to be like, okay, well, how can I better connect with this individual, right? Again, how can I minister to them? Because honestly, there's brethren that you know, um, I can never get a sit down interview with them, right? Or I could never go to their house, so it's over text, or right. But am I inviting them to do something more than what they were doing before? And that's what the Lord, right, with the young rich man, is he's inviting him to do something that he wasn't doing before, and obviously he rejects that. But we can't let that become as if we're failing, right? We see things so linearly. We have a hard time seeing the all-encompassing eternal perspective. Now, I have to understand that my role isn't to change them. I'm not to be their savior, right? I'm not to be the one who does everything for them, or right. They have to do it with the Lord. And so I have to understand, well, even if I don't do the best that I can do, or maybe I fail myself, I would say the Lord will provide a perfect opportunity for each of his children to accept or reject the gospel.
Yeah.
I have to believe that, because otherwise he's not a loving God. Otherwise he's a respecter of persons, right? Everybody will have an opportunity to accept it, whether that's in this life or the next life, whether that's because of something I said or did, or the next Elders Quorum president or the next Elders Quorum president, right? I have to try to be striving to help them and invite them to come closer to Christ. That has to be my goal, and the only goal that I have. Whether they take that and run with it and allow him to heal them and change them and be that blessing in their life, I can't do that. And I can't, right? I can't control that process. I think too often um, we try to control the process of the Lord. We try to say, oh, well, if I just do this, like if I just pray, then he'll answer me. And it's like, guys, that's not what the scriptures teach. Yes, he can answer me and he can give me revelation. But he also said to Oliver Cowdery, all you thought was to ask me. You didn't even try to do anything to translate, right? You didn't even try anything besides just asking. And I see so many people that have left the church and they're like, I prayed about it and God didn't give me an answer. And so I left. And it's like, but that's not the fullness of the gospel. That's just one aspect of the gospel, right? Christ teaches, ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. And I found in my own life, usually you have to do all three of those things to finally get the revelation, to finally get the answer, to finally be open enough to say, it doesn't matter the outcome, Lord. I just want what's best for myself or my family or my ministering families or whatever it may be, that we just open our hearts and have that contrition, right? To repent when we need to. But that I just want what the Lord wants, that his will be done. I think too often we try to put the process into a box instead of let the Lord do his process with us, because each of us individually needs something different. Like I can't expect my experiences. Like I can't say, well, if you just had my experiences, then therefore you would understand like I do, or you would have the testimony I do, or you would do what I do, right? And that's just not how it works. It has to be individual, one-on-one. And we have to let the Lord do his process and want and have a desire, right? Doctrine and Covenants section 4 of, if any of you have a desire to do the work, then what? Right? Then go and do and become like Christ, right? Be diligent, be faithful, be loving, be charitable, all those different attributes. Start implementing those in your life. And as people that really want those things, they will see that light in you. They will see the light of Christ in you and they'll recognize it because they've seen it before. And the funny thing is, it's in each of us. So they've seen it within themselves. They've seen it in other people. And that's what Christ is trying to teach us, right? When he says to be the light on the hill, that it's not about me. It's about showing that the principles and the doctrines and the attributes of Christ can change someone. And you'll have more success in missionary work. You'll have more success in ministering or whatever, because people will resonate with that and see it. Now, again, you can't gatekeep the process, but it's the best way I know how in my own life to show other people that this does actually work, that it's not just a concept or a theology or, a doctrinal belief or whatever, but it's actually something that benefits my life. And when I implement it, it has practical, real application that blesses me.
Yeah. Nailed it. Garth, this has been really, really insightful. And I think you're very thoughtful about all these principles and your approach and things. Any other concept or principle that we maybe should have hit on harder, or what comes to mind? Anything we missed?
Yeah. So some of the other things that principles that we tried to do was, we saw that a lot of people were having difficult, just that initial interaction, right? I think it's more so in our time that people just have like this disconnect Socially, it's socially awkward. Like we haven't implemented it great with home teaching or ministering beforehand. So it's just kind of this awkward phase that can happen. And so two things that I'd like to talk about that we've implemented. And again, this may not work for every ward, right? There's always going to be circumstances where the principles or the things that you implement just aren't working. But find out what the Lord has for you. Again, it's His process. Allow Him to guide you and direct you. And so, two things that we tried to do is we'd never make an assignment until we had met the person and like talked to them, or at least we tried to. Right? We could 100% couldn't do that, but that way we got to know them. So if somebody moved in, we'd go visit with them and get to know them, and then we'd assign them a family or a ministering brother, so that we could say, okay, this person has the more information you have, the better revelation you're going to get. The Lord just isn't going to just give you all the answers. That's just not how it works. And so what we tried to do was get to know them the best we could and try to say, okay, well, who would be a good pairing? And that was part of the talking it out would be, okay, who together would work well together? Who wouldn't work well together? Right? Who can't we put together? Right. And just all the information and just let that sit out on the table and let that guide the process in giving people opportunities to serve and bless the lives of others and try to find commonality. And secondly, the second thing was we tried to give everybody an active family. Because what I found in my time in leadership in bishoprics and elders quorum presidencies in the past was a lot of times they never saw the fruit of ministering or home teaching. A lot of them weren't doing it, but then when they did do it, it was just like door slammed in your face, don't contact me, or like, we don't need any help or whatever. They had a hard time connecting with. And so one of the things we tried to make it not easy, but the probability, I guess you could call it, of success higher. And so we gave every every companionship at least one family that they could see at church that was there pretty much at least once a month or every week or whatnot, that was actively going to church. That way they could say, hey, I see that person every week, right? And that's a reminder, hey, I need to talk to them or I need to get to know them, right? And that reminder, again, going back to me not shaming them into, hey, you guys need to do your home teaching or visiting or ministering or whatever every week or every month or whatever, like get your visits in or whatever. But that reminder that they would see them and that they could have interaction with them on a weekly or monthly basis just by being at church together. So that was one of the other things that we try to do in pairing up companionships. And then this last year, what we've been doing as far as trying to build those relationships and helping them have success is we started implementing what's called ministering night. And so what we decided to do, and in most cases, what we'll do is if we come up with something as an elders quorum presidency, we'll go to the Relief Society in our meetings every month and we'll be like, hey, this is what we're planning on doing. Do you guys want to get on board with us? You don't have to. We're going to move forward with it anyways. Do you want to do this together? And most of the time they're like, yeah, we want to do that together. And so what we decided to do, and we don't do it every month. So like we're not doing it the next couple of months just because it's hard to find people at home because of the holidays and whatnot, and during the summer because people are gone. But every month on the fourth Sunday, and that's just what we decided, we'll invite ministering brothers to come with us. So I'll text them, be like, hey, we want to go visit some of your families. Can you come with us? And 90% of the time they'll come. Wow. And so we started this in January and it's just like 30, 40 minutes. And most of that's travel time. So instead of like, okay, we're going to go in and we're going to visit and get in the house, it's just like, just go to their door and just talk to them for like 5 minutes. That's it. If they invite you in and you have time, sure, go in, go visit with them if you can, if you have time. But if not, just be like, hey, yeah, we're going to visit some other families. We'd love to come back and visit you again, and start that conversation. And the first time we did that, the miracle started happening. I took a brother out that's pretty shy, right? Not talkative a lot. Had a hard time, right, interacting with people. And so we took him out, and he actually had three families that weren't inactive for some reason, but we went to one family that had been inactive, and we knocked on the door, and we had been trying for a long time to really interact with this family. They're an awesome family. I served in the bishopric with him. He was the executive secretary, just an awesome guy. Always did his calling, but they just weren't coming to church after COVID. And we had a hard time getting them, at the door, or contacting with them. And he answered the door, and we just had a 5-minute conversation about life, how things were going. And that was it. That was the experience. And then we went to the next family, and they didn't answer the door, and that was fine. You're going to have that. And then we went to the next family. And this is a guy who I've never met before. They've never come to church, right? We knock on the door, and this is kind of the conversation that ensued. Hey, is so-and-so here? He's like, yeah, that's me. What are you doing here? Right? He came at it very like, what are you doing? Like, very antagonistic, like not so much curious, but like, why are you guys here? Right? Kind of a thing. And right, we just explained to him why we were there and whatnot. And he's like, well, who sent you? And I'm like, dude, really? Nobody sent us. I just
The
asked him to come
FBI.
with me.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it was just random luck of the draw. But as we started to converse with this brother who still has his records on the church, so he's still technically a member. We began to talk with him again, just for like 4 or 5 minutes. But you just saw that attitude melt away to where, right, we started just saying why we were there. Hey, we're just here to support you, to just see how you're doing, check up on you, just in a neighborly Christian way. And he would, at the end, he expressed gratitude for that,
Oh, that's
even
great.
though he
Yeah.
didn't want to go to church, even though, like, right, because it's not, again, ministering isn't a program; it's a way of living.
Yeah.
It's how God interacts with us. Um, and so, anyways, through that interaction, right, we could have a conversation. And I said, would it be okay if we came again sometime, like in a couple months or something? He's like, yeah, sure. Right. It went from
Yeah.
this, like, what the heck are you doing at my doorstep at 7:30 at night on a Sunday, to, yeah, that's actually a great idea how we can, right. And we made it into, we're just trying to be good neighbors.
Yeah.
We're not trying to convert you. We're not trying to get you to come back to church. And if that's the goal, right? If the goal is just, I want to get you baptized, or I want to get you back to church, we've lost what Christ was trying to teach. And that is, no, I just want to love you. I just want to care for you. I want to do what I can for you. And we've lost that in our society. And I think through ministering, we can get that back, not just in the church, but in our society.
Yeah. I love those stories, and just again, this all comes from maybe a more intentional way of, like you mentioned, this ministering night where every fourth Sunday you're going to call some guys and say, let's go visit your families, and away you go. Right. So I assume, just getting to the technicalities of this, each one of your counselors is also going out with a ministering pair, right? And visiting their families.
Yeah. So how logistically it works is we'll just ask some brethren if they can go. And it's like, and I never ask people if they're willing to go. I say, are you available to go?
Mm.
Right? Because each of us sits at the sacrament table and partakes of the sacrament and says we're willing. So I take those covenants seriously and sacred, and so I assume
Yeah.
you're doing the same. And so I don't say, are you willing to go with me? I say, are you available to go and do this, or whatever? So I'll ask, I'll say, who of my counselors are available, my secretary, who's available, and I'll say, okay, 3 of us are available, right? And it's just kind of who's available again. not to say you have to be there or
Yeah,
whatever. So
that makes
if
sense.
we have two of us, then we'll all get two people to go with us. If we can get both of the brethren to go, both of the companionship to go, then maybe we'll try to get another person to come and just have them go on their own, instead of us going with them. And we've done that a number of times. But anyways, so we'll ask a few people to go, and who can ever go, then we'll go with them. And then the sisters will ask some people to go. And it can get kind of mixy because, you don't want to ask somebody who's going to go like the same two people, because they might minister to the other person, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they
Then they're
won't be
not
home
home.
at the
Yeah,
same time. So
yeah,
it can be a little bit of juggling there to make sure that you're not getting people crisscrossing, and not finding each other at home. But I've found that from this experience, and I asked them afterwards, I'm like, what do you think? What did you think about it? And all of them are like, this is great, because I have a hard time in, getting that first step, getting to know them or whatever. And so this is a great opportunity to do that and to start that relationship. And again, we're just there to support them. And what we usually do is we'll meet at my house, and then we'll have a prayer, and we'll explain to them what we're doing, instead of just making it this blind thing. Like, look, we're here to support you. We're here to help you guys in ministering. If you guys need us to come with you, whatever it is, we want to help you and support you. And then we have a prayer, and then we just go. And we found that has like broken through those barriers
hmm
of the
yeah. I bet.
culture,
Yeah,
as well as, and not just the culture in the church of having a hard time with ministering, but also the cultural aspect of, we have a hard time interacting with people face to face.
yep, yep. Really good stuff, Garth. I'm glad that you're trying these ideas and that you're willing to share them, and hopefully others will be inspired by this as well. So, do we hit it all? Any other principle you want to make sure we squeeze in here before we wrap up, or do we do all right?
Just that, again, going back to this idea of teach the principles and live the principles over the process. A lot of times people ask me, why don't people do ministering, or why is it so difficult? And I used to fumble around, like kind of trying to explain it. And it never felt right. Right. It was always, something vague or something that, yeah, it applied to some people, but not to everybody. And as I've thought about that, what I've come to the conclusion of is, it's really just the natural man within each of us. And it depends on what my limitation is. And it goes back to the idea of agency, that agency isn't just choices, but we're also making perceptions. So if I perceive that, oh, ministering doesn't work, or I don't like ministering, or I have a hard time ministering because I'm an introvert, right? If I have that perception, then I'm going to have a harder time getting past that perception in order to do it, or to feel like I'm succeeding at it, or whatever. Part of that interview, or part of that kind of teaching the principles, is getting down to perhaps what's blocking them from ministering. They might give you an excuse, but that might not be what's actually underneath, that's blocking it. And so trying to find what's actually preventing them from feeling like they could do this. Because Kurt, you've probably seen this in your own life, especially recently with all the hurricanes. That feeling of, I want to help.
Yeah.
That feeling of, I want to be a blessing to other people. We've all felt that in our lives. It's there. It's part of our divine nature as sons and daughters of a divine God. But something called the natural man blocks that. And it usually only comes out in those rare circumstances where it's a friend who has cancer, or a friend who's going through a death, or a friend who just had a tragedy. And so that part of us is in there. And I've seen it in so many people. I've seen it in everybody in our ward, and I know it's there. And part of what ministering does is it helps us let go of the natural man and say, I can love and care for somebody despite if they're going through a tragic experience and just in their day-to-day life. Right. And that's what the Lord's trying to do with us, is to get us to love and care for each other all the time. Instead of just have that feeling of love and care when things are difficult. And I don't remember if it's in 3rd Nephi or Helaman, but the Lord basically says, and I'm paraphrasing, if I don't send death, and I don't send tragedy, and I don't send war, and I don't send all these difficult things, you won't remember me. You won't think about me. And on the other flip side of that, you won't remember each other. Right? So in essence, those difficult things in our life are a reminder to us that we do love and care about each other, right? You take 9/11, you take other cultural aspects or events that have happened and how we came together and how we accomplished different things, or just recently with the hurricanes, of people just pouring out this love and support to these people that they don't even know, right? But I have to be able to do that with my neighbor. I have to be able to do that with some guy that I have now on my ministering assignment. And I hate that, but right, that I have to learn how to love and care for that person, regardless of their circumstances, regardless of my circumstances, regardless of what's happening in my life or what's happening in their life. And as we do that, that's how we build Zion. That's how we become a Zion people. That's how we turn our hearts towards our Heavenly Father and our Savior Jesus Christ. And in turn, they will turn our hearts towards our brothers and sisters, whether they hate us, whether they persecute us, whether they're our own kids, whoever it is. That's what the Lord is trying to teach us through ministering, is to love one another, and for it to become a way of life as opposed to an assignment or a program or whatever. Because we can change the name to whatever you want, and we can change the details. Again, it's about the principles of the gospel, especially those attributes of Jesus Christ that help us to love and serve one another.
All right, Garth, last question I have for you is, as you reflect on your time as a leader, how has being a leader helped you become a better follower of Jesus Christ?
So what I tell people about leadership is leadership is easy. Now, let me clarify. That doesn't mean it's not difficult, or there's a lot of things to do, or there's a lot of sacrifice. What it means is, to me, and what I've seen, is the opportunities to serve and love others are abundant. And so we watch people come back from missions, right? We watch people after their time serving as bishop or stake president, and we notice that they've changed, right? A lot of times. We notice that they're more spiritual, that they love and care for one another more. We see these changes in them. And yet I think a lot of times we equate that change to the calling or the assignment. And what it really boils down to is they've been given more opportunities maybe than the rest of us to love and serve those around them. So in that aspect, it's easy to be a leader because you're constantly being given opportunities to serve and to love. And ultimately, by doing those things, you come closer to the Savior. And it's the atonement that changes you. It's not the mission. It's not the calling, but it's the Lord Jesus Christ and his atonement, right? That changes that natural man within each of us to make us become more like him. And so what I've learned as a leader is that if I will look for those opportunities, even when I'm not a leader, I can still have that same change and I can still have those same blessings. And so it's made me a better follower because it's helped me recognize that no matter how long my calling is, I can always be a follower of Jesus Christ and bless the lives of other people.